Good afternoon, cult members, and welcome to the Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Josh.
And this is the Rebel Files, your one-stop shop for everything Star Wars. News, notes, remembrance of things that we love. And there's not much news going on, so we're just going to BS about Star Wars today.
We're going to freestyle it.
That's how it works.
We're not scripted.
We are not scripted. We can write a script to be a bunch of just copy and paste from the internet, which I've done in the past. Any Star Wars adventures now that you're kind of settled into the new place?
Yeah, I've actually been going back through Clone Wars. I've been going back through Rebels. Obviously, this month's the big drop.
Yep.
For, the new season. And, it's actually really kind of cool because, now that they've been talking about what, this final season of Clone Wars is not, it's kind of Clone Wars, but it's also meant to kind of run in parody with, Revenge of the Sith. So there's a lot of little nuances that they're going to cover with Ahsoka, with Anakin, with the whole Padme connection. Not only that, those little connections with the comic book. So there's all those dirty little details. I find myself going back. And I mean, I'm not watching the seasons 100%. I remember enough about the seasons, but there are certain episodes that between Rebels and Clone Wars, I've been going back and actually, rewatching just because I want to get some of those finer plot points.
Yeah. I just, I'm about 7 or 8 episodes into season 5 of Clone Wars. I watched like the last season and a half of Clone Wars and the last 2 seasons of Rebels. I know everything that went on, but I went to the beginning and I've been going through Clone Wars ever, especially after they announced season 7. And so I've been like just, actually, it's what I watch when I'm on the treadmill. Because they're 15, 17-minute long episodes because you take the commercials out and you get a good, 35-minute run in. You can watch 2 episodes of Clone Wars. And so it works out it's perfect. So that's been my big Star Wars adventure lately. That, and I went to Zia Records on Friday. We went to a concert on Thursday night, and so we decided to sleep in on Friday. So we took Friday off, and Janice had to end up going into work. So I went to Zia and was left alone in the pop section. So I came home with a handful of new pops. To be fair, they were loose. To be fair, they were loose out of the box. And they were $5 for how many you could cram in a bag. So it's not like they're taking up a whole space. But I got Lobot, Rose, and Finn. So I was all excited about adding those to my collection, even though I'm a box guy. I know. They take up so much more space, but they just look cooler in the box.
I'm very weird about that. Like it was the couple friends of ours, mutual friends at the Hark. Always stated that, toys are meant to be played with. And I absolutely 100% agree with that sentiment. However, that being stated, I also have dogs. I'm rough on things sometimes. So a lot of times there are ones I will take out of a package and put on display versus there are ones where they are like, you stay in the box until I'm ready for you.
All of my Black Series will stay in the boxes for sure because they're just like, I'm looking at the Grievous one. If I ever open the Grievous Black Series, I'm gonna lose all the different lightsabers. It's just gonna happen, and then they're just not nearly as cool. And I've got another one. I've got the Mando like pieced together armor. So the first armor from the start of the show. And if I open that one, I'm gonna lose the gun. I'm gonna lose something else, And so I don't want to do that. Pops are a little different. I like them in the box because they look cooler. Welcome to Pop Talk here on the Rebel Files. I told you we're going to be
from movies into toys. I can't talk. I have at least once a day I go turn on the Star Wars arcade game and attempt to beat my previous high scores.
Right, because you kind of have to, right? It's in the house. You have to do it. We're talking about this. There's not a ton of news right now. There's a lot of holding pattern for Project Luminous and some of the books that are coming. The second book in the Alphabet Squadron is coming. They delayed the Thrawn Ascendancy. No, Assertion. What are they calling the new Thrawn series? They pushed that to the fall. And so, like the book side, there's kind of a lull right now. I am going to get into the Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker novelization at some point in time here soon because I'm
Yes.
interested to see how they add into the stuff. The big news, my big news, I use my quoting fingers. Big news is Bob Iger had his quarterly meeting. Joseph Scrimshaw from Force Center has coined those meetings IgerCon because we get more information about what's coming for Disney in those calls than we do anything else. And he talked about season 2 of The Mandalorian is coming in October. So we have an official month now. We were told fall. And then the only other thing Star Wars wise he talked about in that call was they are looking into the possibilities of spin-off series, spin-off characters from The Mandalorian. Now, he didn't necessarily say members from the first season or the second season,
Right.
but considering we're going to talk a little bit of spoilers here about The Mandalorian. So if you haven't seen The Mandalorian yet, come back in like 5-10 minutes and we'll be back into a different conversation. But with what they did at the end of The Mandalorian and what that could actually mean, what kind of spinoff would you like to see them do?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, it's going to kind of depend on what they do with Clone Wars. If they're branching, right? If they're branching off into this, we've seen snippets from the trailer where it looks like we might actually have Siege of Mandalore. They've mentioned ISB officers and rebels. So we might get some hint into that. Now, that being stated, depending on what they do, I think if we're going to do spin-off characters, I think it's more than likely we're going to see something with Cara Dune. Because she's obviously got some backstory that may also segue into, Baze Malbus and Chirrut with, kind of the shock troopers and everything else.
That would be so cool to add them in.
Absolutely. Realistically, we're probably going to see something around Gideon. Or at least something that brings Gideon into the fold a little bit more. Again, it just depends on how much backstory they want to give him. But with the fact that he is an ISB officer, and he's familiar with the Siege of Mandalore and had to get the Darksaber somehow.
Right. And he also is a Moff. Moff. So, is he a self-appointed Moff? Is he, was he made a Moff after the fall of the Death Star and the Emperor and everything like that, and they had to scramble and put people in? So he was a trusted IFB agent, IFCQ. You said it twice now. But the idea of him, like that backstory, I think is something they'll do in Mandalorian season 2, or at least give us more of the backstory there. A standalone movie or a standalone show with him might be a little rough. I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna. We are interested in the Empire part of the story. I think that would be kind of cool to do an Empire part of the story. I don't know if Lucasfilm and Disney Plus is ready to do that kind of story, because if you go off of what they've done in the books, showing that on TV is not going to go over very well.
No, it's exactly it. And it's gritty, I mean, Rebels and Clone Wars touched a lot on it. We really got into it with Rogue One, where we started seeing the grittier side of the Empire. No, I agree. I don't think it's going to be a dedicated, or centralized around Moff Gideon. I think they're going to figure out a way to bring him into whatever spinoff they decide to do. That way they can kind of hit two birds with one stone and show that these characters have some passive, even though they may have never met in person, judging by the finale, they're aware of individuals or the ilk to it.
Yes.
The one that I really think they're gonna possibly tap into, and whether they do it or not remains to be seen, but I think they're kind of missing in on a potential cash cow or at least fan service opportunities to bring an Inferno Squadron. The timing is right. So it's post Endor, but if you've got Gideon, it might be interesting to bring an Inferno Squadron either in flashbacks or whatever. Because at the time of the Mandalorian, Iden's kind of done her crossover. She's either has done it or is in the middle of joining the Rebels. So it kind of remains to be seen. But I think they're two very, very strong characters that absolutely deserve to be explored. We might see it on the Mandalorian side itself with the rest of the Mandalorians. who knows? You know,
the idea of who they could bring in season 2, because of the Darksaber, and you have Bo-Katan, and you have Sabine, and any of the Wrens. You could do Tristan Wren or any of the Wren clan. That whole concept could be very interesting to do as a live action. Or we've heard rumors of an animated show about Sabine and Ahsoka going off in the search of Ezra, and you could tie it directly into the Mandalorian, and that would be kind of an interesting thing to do. I'm not opposed to it. With these Iger phone calls, it's he's a CEO. He's talking about stuff to make the shareholders happy. And so I don't know if it necessarily is like, this is a definitive thing that's going to happen. If he says they're looking into it or they're developing something, they could be developing 20 projects. Doesn't mean any of them will get ready or get done.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumors that are flying right now, but depending on the sources, the one thing that I found out is a lot of times that these sources are somewhat on the ball for the most part. So they're 100%, but some of them are pretty accurate. So they're talking about the fact they've already actually started working on the script for that Rebels follow-up. And a lot of it has to get into potentially that Ezra's got kind of a new mentor in the form of a Rakuten. Now, I don't know if they're going to actually bring Rakutans back into it. It's not the first time that I've heard this. It was in the Colin Trevorrow script.
Yeah.
So they're kind of a throwover from Old Republic. It would be interesting to kind of bring it in because they're kind of an interesting alien race.
Right.
Don't know if that's going to happen, but there's a lot of leverage there between the two angles of that series, where you have Thrawn and Ezra off on one hand, then you've got Sabine and Ahsoka off on the other. So there's your dual storylines.
That would be a lot of fun to watch.
It would be. It's up in the air. I think there's a lot of character depth that they can get into now because of what they've established without having to tap into the Skywalker saga. Right. So a lot of breadth for character development at this point. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. It's not my script. It's not my story. But I think that there are writers out there who are doing amazing treatments on it. I've kind of said it before, and I'll say it again. Now that Trevorrow's script is leaked fully in its entirety online, I think Duel of the Fates would have been a fantastic movie. I liked Rise of Skywalker. So it's hard for me to tell which one I think they should have gone with. Part of me says Trevorrow, part of me says Rise of Skywalker. It's up in the air. They're all good takes on it.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing about the way they did it with the sequel trilogy, which we're going to get more into here in a little bit. But the sequel trilogy and having each of them do their own story, a lot of people complained that there was no continuity between the three stories because they were going to let three different people do it. And I'm actually okay with that. I want to see Trevorrow's interpretation and Rian Johnson's interpretation, and I want to see Guillermo del Toro's interpretation. I want to see Sam Mendes's interpretation, giving these creators and directors and story runners and stuff like that, give them an opportunity to tell their version of Star Wars. I think is cool. Like I would love to see that. Like we've gotten Lucas's version. Let's get everybody else's version now.
Right, it's a much bigger universe, and I think they're really starting to get into their stride of to separate the Skywalker 9 movies from everything else. Just take that, set it on its own filmatic thing. However, if you look at the Star Wars universe as a whole, what they've been doing with things like The Mandalorian, with Clone Wars, with Rebels, they're getting into this giant scope and scale to the galaxy of all these little interactions between different character classes. I think this is where they need to be, and somebody said it best, I want new characters to be excited about. I grew up with Luke. I grew up with his family. I want to move beyond that. I got into Ravon and the Old Republic stuff and everything else. I think there's a lot of room for character development. And I think they're at a point where they can do that, and to anybody who's going to go back and honestly say, well, multiple directors or multiple writers, there's no continuity. Look what they did with The Mandalorian. How many directors does The Mandalorian have?
To be fair, though, they had one group of writers writing all along, but each of the directors put their own spin on it. You can tell. I could definitely tell when Tika was directing compared to when Deborah Chow was directing, and so so I don't want to beat that into the ground because we could go down on a deep hole of what a spinoff from Mandalorian could be. It could be something as simple as Quill, like his backstory as Ugnaught in the Empire. You could tell that whole story would be really interesting. You could do the whole Cara Dune learning how to be a bounty hunter. You got that whole angle. You've got the three that are still stuck in the prison that with Bill Burr and all that whole group all that kind of stuff that you could do. Did you hear the rumor? Okay, it wasn't a rumor. The fake story that was going around that George Lucas is coming back as the executive producer and showrunner of the Cassian Andor series.
Yeah.
Did you see? Credible people that I find credible in the Star Wars lexicon of talk pieces and news and stuff like that was posting it like it was gospel. And it's just like I have to giggle at that because then we turn around and we hear something from Bob Iger. If Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, says we're thinking about doing this, and then, and then you get George Lucas is coming back to do this whole series. Okay, where'd you hear that? Bob's Big Boy on the corner of Wilshire and Beverly. I mean,
Lucas. Here's the thing about George. George is Stanley at this point. You know, it's not necessarily his baby anymore, but he's 100% okay with occasionally coming back in and adding his touch. But after all his stuff got cut pretty much out of Rise of Skywalker, I don't know how much he's going to come back and want to do things.
Right.
But again, we could get an extended version. There is rumor that we could get an extended cut. But I don't know how big is that. I mean, he's got love for it. It was his baby. He still wants to come back and visit it, but I don't think he's going to invest himself that heavily.
He is spending all of his time in the Lucas Museum that they're building in Los Angeles. I think it's Los Angeles. And just that's his focus now. He's done. Yeah. He's told his part of his story. He's built the universe. He's now working on something else. And so anytime I hear any story about George Lucas is coming back because he was on the set of Mandalorian for a couple of days, hanging out with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, they're all friends. So
yeah,
the Russo brothers,
they still treat him as he's still Filoni's mentor, for lack of a better term. Right. They're all friends. They all chat together. They talk the universe together. But yeah, I mean, he's got bigger fish to fry, and he said it. He said it back in the day when he finished the original trilogy. And they went in and Timothy Zahn did the original trilogy sequel books and everything else with Heir to the Empire. Right. He said, look, it's done. He's like, it's time to let the fans explore the universe and create it. And he was right.
And he was right. And people are doing that now, and some fanboys are having a problem with it, and they just need to shut up. So that's pretty much all the real news that's kind of been going on. But there was a really cool conversation there's a new-ish podcast. It's called Riley's Cantina. It is run by Mark Riley, formerly of Collider YouTube's channel. He was a producer and was part of the Jedi Council there, and very cool guy, very much a writer. He's working on some stuff. But he started his own weekly Star Wars cantina thing where him and somebody else, kind of how we do it, do a sit down and just talk about Star Wars. Whatever happens to come up is what happens to come up. And that was it. There's nothing else fancier to it. They do, however, drink a bottle of wine in the 2-hour podcast. Now, I'm not a super wine person. You're not overly a wine person, but we could sit down and have some cocktails and talk Star Wars. It's like that never happens. But one of the things that I'm like looking, where's the whiskey is over there. One of the things that came up during that this last week's podcast was, what is your favorite scene or scenes or motifs or whatever from the sequel trilogy? There's a lot of discord online about how the sequel trilogy got a lot of things wrong, and a lot of people just want to talk about just hate on it, just straight out the sequel trilogy as a whole. And neither one of us are that way. We both like the sequel trilogy a lot. And so I was just like, let's talk about our favorite things. So whatever happens to be, it could be a scene, it could be a new character, it could be a motif they were teaching, whatever, what we liked from the sequel trilogy. And so, do you have anything off the top of your head? Because I have like,
Oh God. Yeah, there's tons of little spots. Now some of it was fan service. I'm not gonna lie, but
so
one of the things they did was actually going back to McQuarrie's concepts, and that was
yes,
overarching the entire thing. I grew, us growing up in our time period that we did, we saw Star Wars, we witnessed it, and then the McQuarrie concepts start coming out, and you start having this love of these original designs. And I say that because at the time Star Wars came out, look at how sci-fi was. You had Star Wars, you had Star Trek. They kind of set a tone for the different style of future.
yeah,
Star Wars
yeah,
being
yeah,
that
yeah.
dirty future. So for them to kind of go back to the McQuarrie drawing board and bring in a lot of those original renderings back into the Star Wars universe, the fact that the new X-wings are essentially the original designs for the X-wings,
Yeah, yeah.
Tatooine concepts on Jakku. Those were really, really cool for me to see. Visually speaking, I think they've done fantastic with their cinematography. I like the fact that they went back to practical effects. That brings the magic back. However, and this will get me ostracized from I don't know how many groups, and I don't care. My favorite scene in the whole of the trilogy, the new trilogy, was from The Last Jedi. And that was when Yoda sits there and brings the lightning down on the tree.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
literally sitting there because and you know me, I have been like this huge supporter of the the Jedi and the Sith. We're just extremists. There is a balance to the Force. So when he did that, like I felt like everything I believed in at that point was validated. Was just like there is only the Force. There is no
Yes.
Jedi. There is no Sith. They're
Right.
extremists. And I was like, my favorite thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was my favorite scene. I never thought I'd get to actually see Yoda literally sit there and go, yeah, page turners, were they not? It was just I was like, "Argh!" So yeah.
I love his frankness at that point in time. Like
Right.
he was 900 years old when he died, and then he's been in the force realm, whatever, heaven or whatever. And he's learning all this new stuff and learning, like from his mistakes, which is one of the things they talk about with Luke that a lot of people hated and stuff. But him just walking in and bopping Luke on the top of the head. It's just an awesome scene. One of the first things that came to my mind when we started talking about having this conversation was at the end of The Force Awakens. And it's when they're in the snow on Starkiller Base, and Finn obviously doesn't know what to do with a lightsaber because Kylo beats him pretty easily, even though he's been shot with a bowcaster, and we know how badass a bowcaster is.
Right.
And he turns around and goes to force pull the Skywalker saber out of the snow, and it flies across the air past him to Rey, and Rey catches it, and the surprise in her face that it actually worked, and then her like defiant stance of turning it on was like the first time where I was just like, I think Rey's going to be one of my favorite new characters, and she ends up being because of what she does there. And then what she does at the end of Rise of Skywalker, Rey has become my favorite character. Like she is her path, her decisions, the things that she was for, people trying to force their agenda onto her and her pushing it away and everything. And the last scene in Rise of Skywalker when she flicks her gold lightsaber on as a defender of the Force, and it just like those two scenes are like bookends for me for Rey, and it's just something about that surprise in her face when she's like, "Oh my God, that worked! Oh, okay, now what do I do?" It was so cool. Anything else that kind of comes up? I've got a couple other things too, but uh, I know Last Jedi is a tentative conversation. You have to be ginger while talking about it, but the throne room with Snoke and the fight that ends up happening after that is some of the best choreographed fighting we've ever seen in Star Wars. So it's just some of the straight out just badassery, and just I always go to that scene as a starting point for conversations when it comes to Last Jedi. You can't say Last Jedi is completely trash because that scene is amazing. And there's you can't look at that scene and go, I'm sorry, that's just stupid. You know,
it was great. I don't know if I would put it at the best choreographed. Yeah, they were doing it on green screen, but I'd have to say that a lot of the prequel fight scenes were extremely impressive.
That's fair. That is fair.
Yeah, the thing that drove me. So here's the funny thing, and the funny thing is, I loved the fight scene. I love the Kylo Rey team up fight scene, and I agree, the choreography is phenomenal. The only thing I absolutely despise about that scene is the throne room. I have no idea why they went with that whole, red motif.
Yeah.
It annoys the snot out of me. That being stated, take that out of the whole thing. The fight scene was fantastic. They've stepped up a lot with their choreography, and I think a lot of that had to go with, okay, let's face it, we don't want to watch Darth Vader and Obi-Wan fight in that particular style forever.
Right.
And you could tell even in the original trilogy with it, Luke's fighting style had adapted. He moved beyond that and got a little more aggressive, and you start seeing the different lightsaber forms. Yeah, I think they were right on par with their fight choreographies in this one.
Yeah.
They were very, very careful to show. For those people who were into the details of it, they were cognizant of bringing in the different forms, showing why Rey fought in this particular style, whereas Kylo Ren fought in a different style.
And Kylo's use of the cross guards, and they showed that multiple times, and that was such a cool addition to lightsaber battles. It gives it a little bit more intimacy of being close up and stuff. You can do these really cool fight scenes too, because Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver are athletic, and they add so much more that they can physically be the people who are doing the fights. And so that was one of the cool things about the Anakin and Obi-Wan fight, was that it was Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen actually doing the fighting. It wasn't just stunt doubles. And
right.
What else?
And to that point, just the thing is they started doing more things with the lightsabers that I think over the years the fans have always pointed out. It's like, well, why are you sticking to this fight style when you can flip a saber on, flip a saber off? So they started paying attention to the actual physical mechanics of how you could fight with a lightsaber and the different techniques and the tactics you could use with it. And so for me, that stood out quite a bit, because I think in this particular sequel trilogy, we saw a lot more lightsaber dynamics, what you could actually do with their makes, their models, and their styles. And I thought that was cool to bring to the table.
Which came first? Have you watched the final season of Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Okay. Which came first, the dagger drop or the lightsaber drop that Rey does in the throne room? Who learned it from who?
Lightsaber drop. Lightsaber drop. That being stated, that drop technique is kind of a trope in some sword fighting movies. So
it makes sense. It just changes the plane. We both do sword fighting stuff. We understand changing planes.
Oh yeah,
and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Some of the comedy, a lot of people have complained about the yuck jokes that we got, the Marvel jokes, if you will, in the sequel trilogy. But I've liked how they've added, allowed people like Oscar Isaac, who is our naturally funny person, and allow him to really lean into the fun that is, a space opera. And I love the quote unquote your mama joke that he did to Hux.
I hated it.
I understand why people hate it. And I understand why people didn't like it and stuff like that. I liked a lot of that humor that was in Last Jedi, and they turned around and did it again with C-3PO and Rise of Skywalker. He had all the best lines in Rise of Skywalker, that kind of stuff. Let's I'll give you a chance to come back with the comedy things, because I know it wasn't necessarily your favorite thing, but what other comedy parts of the new trilogy that you like?
I loved Poe. I loved the Poe and the Finn dynamics the most. Rey was not a comical character. She wasn't meant to be. She wasn't a real thing. I like the fact that that BB-8 had a little bit more of that Chopper-esque back talk.
Yes.
To it. Like they
Yeah.
for a freaking rolling ball, they gave him probably more personality than R2D2. I hate to say that, guys. Sorry. BB-8 had more personality than R2D2. Chopper still wins the cake in my opinion.
Yeah.
But they brought that into it. And I liked Poe's humor. And the thing that I hated about the mama joke at the beginning of it was I'm fine with the humor, but when we look at it in terms of how the humor is constructed in Star Wars, when you look at the original trilogy, it's very British. It's dry.
Very
Now
dry.
I'm a fan of dry British humor. That's my
Yeah.
jam. They
Yeah.
tried to Americanize it just a little bit, and I think it fell short. The concept of that opening sequence with Hux and Poe, it was funny. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't like the placement of it, and the only reason I didn't like the placement was because it felt out of time and space. Because they're doing a phone joke. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
hold. That type of thing. And I
Yeah.
don't think it quite worked the way it wanted it to. I think there were other things that they could have
I
done.
understand that. I
But
understand that.
that being said, Poe's humor I liked. He had a very Han kind of that, swashbuckler type of humor. It was very
Right.
random and in the heat of the moment. So I did enjoy the humor to some degree. Yes, I didn't like that particular scene, but I do like the fact that they showed that the characters, they're human. They're going to have
Right.
humor as
Right.
levity in times of stress. We've always seen that. So I think it was okay for the most part. That one bugged me. The rest of it I think was good.
Yeah, I get that. One of my favorite things in the Force Awakens specifically, but they really kind of leaned into it with the Rise of Skywalker, was that nostalgic feel. Star Wars is at this point in time, a generational thing that you share. It's very much like baseball. The father takes the son to the baseball game. That son becomes an adult, has kids of their own, takes him to the same baseball game with his dad. Star Wars is now that because it's been around for 40 plus years. And so a lot of people complained about the fact that Force Awakens felt like A New Hope, and then they complained that Last Jedi felt like nothing that was Star Wars, and then everybody said it was too much nostalgia and Rise of Skywalker. But that was one of the things I loved the most was they gave us a lot of these different points where it was like, you remember this thing that you loved when you were a kid and you watched the original trilogy, and then when you had your kids and you tried to get them into the prequels, well, here it is again, and they're teaching their kids, and so that I love that they allowed themselves to do that. Now, did they lean on it too much at times? For me, I don't think so, but I understand why some people feel that way. Were they too nostalgic, or was that one of the things you liked about the new sequel trilogy?
I like the nostalgia to a degree. I was one of those people who, when we walked out, in fact, I think you were probably there when it happened, when I walked out of Force Awakens and was like, oh, that was great. They completely redid the first Star Wars.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now, that being stated, I had to kind of take a break and I had to go back to it. And then so Star Wars is cyclical. It's absolutely, if you look at
Totally.
Old Republic, it's cyclical. The same crap happens over and over again. Now, that being stated, so we had A New Hope. We had Force Awakens. But if we really want to start nitpicking, let's go back to Phantom Menace. We had, boom, starts out on a desert, kids. Okay, great. Boom, segues into space. Boom, there's a space battle with a bunch of ships trying to take out some orb-like, Federation planet.
Yes.
There's a ground battle going on simultaneously. Oh, wait, and there's a Jedi and a Sith having a lightsaber duel.
Yeah.
There you go.
I call that all mirroring. They all mirror each other in some one way or the other. The second in each of the three trilogies is always the much more dark, the bad guys win, that kind of thing. And the third one is the yay, we finally win, the war is over. The difference with the the Revenge of the Sith and the other two third ones in the trilogy is the war was over, but the Republic is what actually is built, not the rebellion winning and stuff like that. But it's everything mirrored each other. Each one of the three of the series mirrored each other, and I just liked that they allowed themselves to Chewie we're home moment, or Rey flying Red 5 with Luke's helmet on, and I love the stuff that I love about Star Wars is that stuff. And then they come back and show it to me again. Of course, I'm going to love that stuff.
One of the things that, kind of going along that with those little tidbits is there's actually stuff coming out now about things like The Force Awakens and all of that. Now, I know it's part of production. I don't want to call it retconning, but they're filling in details that make things that much more impactful to go back and watch it. Like, I believe it was like a week and a half ago where they actually came out and said what planet Starkiller Base is. And it's Elam.
Elam, yeah.
Elam. Yeah. Now, dude, that's like lightsaber crystal haven, and it would make sense to convert that into Starkiller Base with the amount of, kyber crystals they need. Yep. But the fact that finding out that was Elam that they had converted into Starkiller Base, like, dude, that tugged at me. Yeah. That was like, that's where the little Padawans went to go mine their crystals.
I just watched that episode on Clone Wars.
Yeah,
I just watched it yesterday.
I was like, are you effing kidding me? That was, I was like, oh my God. So, and that has little implications. So now you got a whole future. Okay, where are you getting your kyber crystals from? I know they have them in other spots.
Yeah.
But it's still like, so how does that change the direction of how they approach things now? So just little bits like that make me go back and watch those movies with almost like a whole new, field of view.
Right, exactly. Every time they add, like, one of the reasons I love Rogue One so much is that it adds to A New Hope.
Absolutely.
And why I love Solo so much, and it adds to Han's story of why he makes decisions that he does in everything from A New Hope to Return of the Jedi. And I still want to call it Revenge of the Jedi. I know it's not that's the word, but I always want to call it that. But that's why I love those movies so much, is that they add to something that I already loved. That's why I love the books so much, just because they add something new. I have a brand new appreciation for A Phantom Menace because I've gone and done Master and Apprentice, and I've done Dooku Jedi Lost, and the Padme books, and it adds more story to the movies that are already out. They did the same thing here, where they added more information or nostalgia or whatever it is that improves the prequels, improves the original trilogy, improves. So I'm appreciative of that.
And I think that warrants a shameless plug, actually, for everyone who's gearing up to go see Clone Wars when it drops this season. If you haven't read it, go read the Ahsoka novel.
Yeah. Maybe I'll start doing that tomorrow. I need to go back and do the Ahsoka novel. It's been 3 or 4 years since it's been a while since I've done it, so I need to go back and revisit it.
That fills in a lot of gaps.
Absolutely. Anything else from the sequel trilogy that you really loved, and why you appreciate it a little bit more than probably most people?
It expanded the universe again. We took the core story and expanded the universe, and I think that's one of the things that as fans we love about Star Wars. Yes, we like the Jedi. Yes, we like the Sith. But I think at the end of the day, there's such a rich lore, there's such a rich history, and it's like Lord of the Rings. You're able to take and just build upon this universe and this galaxy, and that's what we love so much. So we want to see more of the galaxy. We want to see more of those stories. Everybody, like tons of people hated Solo, and I'm like, look, okay, take Solo out of it, and it was still good for his character. Yes, they changed some stuff, but they were going to do that. It was phenomenal for the Calrissian side. They established that Donald Glover's a phenomenal Lando Calrissian.
Yes, he is.
It showed a different side to the Star Wars universe, kind of like the Mandalorian's doing. And I think a lot of us are hungry for that. We want to see other elements of it. And so kudos to them for taking the chance and actually starting to expand this universe.
Yeah, good. Yeah. That's what a lot of people want now. Now that we're done with the Skywalker saga as we know it, expanding and moving forward. And, even if they go back and do High Republic, like that's just going to add and expand the universe and expand the lore of the Jedi and the Sith. Or if they want to go forward in time and build that out, it adds more sand to the playground, and I think that's always going to be good.
Go ahead. So here's a question for you then. Speaking of High Republic, so I was going to ask you this in the show at some point. So with the fact that they're going to do High Republic, and the fact that they're not going as far back as Old Republic, because they've kind of kept that in the expanded area now.
Right.
Do you think they're going to work with the fan clamoring for it, do you think they're going to work Revan into the High Republic?
It's not out of the realm of possibility. There's some poking and prodding and stuff like that they're going to have to do with the overall story canon that may make it almost impossible to put them in there. I'm not saying that it's not. They've mentioned Revan in the new canon, so he is canon, but there's not a whole lot of detail with him. So that adds. It would be very interesting bringing somebody like that, or Bane, or Darth Plagueis the Wise, or like characters like that are known within the story canon, also beloved because of the legend stuff. That just, I think if they're smart, they'll let all of that sit and bring in new characters first and set them up and build them, and then bring in I'm not saying that this is what they're going to do, and I'm not saying that this is what I want them to do, but build. If you're going to do High Republic, do the story of 2, but have that be 2 new Sith characters that we've never heard of before, and find out later on that one of them was Revan's apprentice, and then you can go back and tell that story too. So it's that kind of stuff that I think they're going to probably end up doing. Because as much as the fans are asking for Revan and Ahsoka and Bane and all of that, the Old Republic and stuff like that, as much as the fans are asking for that stuff, I think they need to get away from anything that's currently known in the universe and expand it out from where we're at. And so it's really hard for me to sit there and say we're never going to get Raven. We're going to get it's going to happen. It's or Revan. It's going to happen, but it's never going to be. It's never going to live up to what the hype is of the people. Right. So if you just do it gingerly and like maybe throw in hints here and there, that would be a really cool way of doing it. And then season 6 of the Hogwarts version of the Jedi Academy, you throw in all of a sudden, then Revan's standing there. So that's just my thought right now. That could all change when we hear Project Luminous, or when we hear like another prequel book comes out, or whatever. So that's my thought. So, anything else this week you want to talk about before we call it a night?
No. Otherwise, go read your books. Go bone up on your lore, because we're about to get Clone Wars, and I think that's going to change a few things.
Yeah, Clone Wars, I think it drops next...
21st?
Is it the 21st?
21st of the 20... I want to say the 21st. Hold on.
Yeah, it's the end of the month. I do think it is the 21st, because that's when we're at our event at the War. So I think it drops while we're gone. And I don't know if you've heard of that. Are they dropping it all at once, or are they going to do it week by week, like they did The Mandalorian?
I think it's going to be week by week. I haven't seen anything that says they're going to do it in one sitting. If they're smart, they're trying to drive subscribers, they're going to probably do it piecemeal.
Yeah. Bring those people back from that unsubscribed after The Mandalorian left. Don't unsubscribe from Disney Plus. It's freaking amazing. Like it's
great.
The Jeff Goldblum show is on there. The Imagineering story is on there. There's a bunch of really good movies, and all the Star Wars stuff is on there. They just put Last Jedi on there like last week or the week before. So everything's there. So that is this week on the Rebel Files. What did you guys think? Tell us what your favorite part of the sequel trilogy is in the comments down below. While you're here, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, share with all of your Star Wars friends, and follow us on all the social media stuff: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I don't know why Twitter, but it's Twitter. It's a thing. So if it draws people in, I'm totally cool with posting stuff. So let us know what you thought. And until next time, I'm one with the Force.
And the Force is with you. Take care.